learned about Andreev states, current phase relations, and blah blah blah, all these kind of things. So if I use some language or some concepts which are obscure to you, please interrupt. And then I will finish by high frequency measurements, where and saying that what we can learn from them, and in particular that you can learn from the presence of protected crossings in the Andreev spectrum. So bismuth, this is a very old material in some sense, because apparently it has been the first paper of bismuth. Okay, I'm not an expert, but something like 17th century. And so it's a very well-known material because it has all kind of crazy interesting properties, not only on transport, but in terms of, it has also very interesting mechanical properties, thermoelectric properties, and so on and so on. But it's, in some sense, it's not a very simple system in the crystallographic point of view, because this is a unit cell of bismuth. And I don't know if you see well in 3 dimensions, but what needs to be seen here is that there is this is basically a rhombohedral cell, but which has, if you look it it has also some hexagonal symmetry. And if you compute, and also you have to take into account that there are 3 orbitals per atom, px, py, pz, which are hybridized with s orbitals. So you have also to take into account spin-orbit interactions, which are very strong in bismuth. So all this determines, in fact, this crazy band structure here, which consists of, if you look it here in 3D, in the Brillouin zone, you can see that there is basically nothing. There is basically no carriers in bismuth. It's called, there are only small pockets. This is here hole pockets. These are here electron pockets, which have this funny shape here. And for example, for the hole pockets, they look like cigars, which means that you have very small effective mass. And this is when you see it from the top, you have these 3 the problem is that the colors are not the same, but here you have these 3 electrons pockets, which look like cigars, and there is a whole pocket, which is here. And you can see the Fermi energy is extremely small here. And so this is why you have very few electrons, but these electrons are very mobile because they have a very small effective mass. Okay, and then here are the whole bands. Here you can see now. And the problem is that if you follow the recipe, which was introduced by Fu and Kane for saying if a system is topological or not, bismuth is not a topological insulator. And the reason is that when you look at all these occupied bands of bismuth, this is you have to remember that you have these 3 bands to consider, because you have px, py, pz orbitals. And if you look at the eigenvalues of the inversion operator, which at all the spatial symmetry points of the Brillouin zone here, so the eigenvalue should be either 1 or -1 in these spatial points here, which are the time reverse inversion, in fact, these points here. And if you make the products of all of these, they can be minus or plus, but if you make the product of all these here, you can, believe me, you find 1. And what you did for a topological insulator is basically a band inversion. That is, this number has to be -1, and there should be also an odd number of those. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but this is just to explain to you why people were not so excited by bismuth in the world of topological insulators. So, but in our, the story is a little bit different. if you consider now only a bilayer of bismuth, so along a 1-1-1 direction, so then you have something which is much simple to understand. This is just a bilayer of hexagons, which, because they are not, okay, this is just hexagonal cell, but a little buckle like this, because it looks like atoms are not in the same plane. But in some sense, it can remind you something about graphene, except there are two differences, that you have this buckling here, and also the big difference is this large spin-orbit interaction. So now if you compute, in fact, the band structure of this guy, you observe that basically it's gapped here, but in the gap you have 1D states here, which cross the which connect valence band and conduction band, and in fact and cross the Fermi energy, in fact, in 3 points here, and this is a signature of 2D topological insulator. So what does that mean? Is that this bilayer is basically insulating, except along the edges here, where you have 1D metallic states, and which also should be spin polarized, but they are supposed to be helical. That is, you expect to have this spin momentum locking on these states. That is, electron going this way should be up spins, and the electron going this way should be down spin on both these edges here. So this is a prediction, but the point is that no one up to now has isolated this bilayer of bismuth. It's alone, and it's not so easy, because you have bismuth gets oxidized very easily. But what people have done, in fact, is STM experiments on microscopic bismuth crystals, and you have some kind of defects on these crystals, which can be either mesas or pits. Here, this is a pit here, which has hexagonal symmetry, and the depth of this pit correspond to, in fact, just a bilayer. And people have noticed when doing this STM experiments, that this is, in fact, one of these bilayers sitting, in fact, on the bulk. And what they have noticed, indeed, that you have a sharp increase of density of states on the edges, depending on now there are subtleties depending on the real termination of this bilayer, because due of this buckling here, you have A-type and B-type bilayer, which behave a little bit different, but still you have 1D features which indicates that indeed you maybe have hinge states. There have been other kind of experiments, which are ARPES experiment. I don't know if you heard about this nice technique, which is angular resolve spectroscopy, X-ray spectroscopy, which can, this is people do this kind of experiment in synchrotrons, and they can produce you. This was, in fact, a big revolution in condensed matter, because they can produce you band structures, and that is E of K, like in textbooks. And so this was done, this was something very important for topological insulators. And in that case, they could really reveal, this is one of these layers of bismuth here, and you have this triangle mesas here, and they could reveal here the formation of edge states along these bilayers. But now, all what I've told you concerns bilayers, and what I would like to present you is transport. And these samples are not, of course, not adequate for transport, because everything will be short-circuited by the bulk. And what we're working on is nanowires. So what does happen? What happens now if you try to make a nanowires from these bilayers? And I want to present you here some a very nice numerical simulation, which was done by Anil Murani, working our former student on that, because he was very courageous to, in fact, compute the band structure of bilayer, because this is, I want to emphasize that because no theorist did that, and he did it as a PhD student doing between experiments, and he just piled up, you know, and because I even told him not to do that. I said it's too complicated, you know, you look at this bismuth with all these atoms in the cell, and don't do that, and he did it, and this is what he obtained, you know, he just computed the band structure of this guy, and it turned out to be no, because first he did this. Okay, no, first he did what was done before, which is the bilayer, and he found, you know, and then what he did, and this is why I think we can be confident. He just piled up these bilayers like this, and he solved it. And you know what he found is that of course, this is not very big size, but this gives some encouraging result in the sense that you still find these H states here, one on the top, one on the bottom. Here you have this rhomboedric geometry, but you will see this is a natural geometry for nanowires. And what he has also is formation of a surface state here. But what is very nice now, if you look at, okay, the states, what you see a bunch of spaghettis, ugly spaghettis, which come from this. Most of them come from the surface state here. The bulk state has only very small contribution because, as I told you, the bulk state have very small Fermi energy, very small effective mass. So basically, Fermi wavelength is enormous, so it cannot fit in this kind of nanowire. So you have, but on the other hand, you have a lot of surface states, and these surface states have small Fermi energy, so they can live here, and you can see they produce all these spaghettis here. But there is one state here which is in red, and the reason why it is in red is that there is more electron density on this state, and this state is exactly the same as this one. So what is nice, it looks like in spite you have a lot of surface states living at the same energy, and they don't in fact interfere with this hinge state here, which seems to survive. So this is very encouraging. This was very encouraging for us, and it was very helpful for us to understand the first experiment we did at that time. But then, of course, the great guys came. These, the group of André Bernavik, and they solved completely the problem of this bismuth with their very powerful tools here. And what they realized is that something was missed when people were saying that bismuth was not a topological insulator. Just by applying the rule, you know, but you multiply all these eigenvalues and you find that it doesn't give the right result. Because what they say, yes, of course, it's not a topological insulator, but it is just the superposition. They really combine the Hamiltonian of bismuth into the superposition of two, in fact, topological insulators. One of them has a 2 pi over 3 symmetry here, and one of them has inversion symmetry. And by doing so, what they found is the following, that you have insulating bulk, you have also insulating surfaces, and you have, in fact, what they call these hinge states instead of edge states along the facets of bismuth. And the idea is that in terms of topology, these hinge states connect, in fact, surfaces of opposite masses or opposite topological numbers here. So, and these are 1D. They're supposed to be strongly protected against disorder, in contrast with what may happen on the surface and the bulk. And also, they are spin polarized. At least they are helical. I have to say one thing anyway, that it's not real bismuth, as you can say, because they completely skipped the semi-metallic character of bismuth. That is, they made some approximation on the Fermi energy of bismuth in order that they don't have any bulk, neither surface state. That what they say is that this should not change the results. So in our case, we're still a little bit concerned about possible interactions between the remaining surface states and these very nice hinge states, except, but okay, at least theorists tell us that we should not matter. So we try to forget this. But anyway, now what I think has not been done really very seriously is the effect of Coulomb interactions. And this is difficult to admit that there might be strictly no effect. Okay? There was a no, I thought there was a question. Okay. So now I come to what we're working on. We're working on this kind of samples here, which are monocrystalline bismuth nanowires, which in fact are grown by Alik Kazumov using a sputtering machine. No, you just deposit. In fact, what he does is just deposit by sputtering from a target. You know how? Does everyone here knows here what sputtering is? Yeah. So okay. So I speak about sputtering, and who doesn't know and who knows? Okay, I'm sorry. So who doesn't know? Yes. I'm sorry. So who doesn't know what sputtering is? Okay. So you're too shy to ask me the question. You know? No, when you want to deposit a thin layer of something, you have different ways of doing it. So the most common one is Joule evaporation. So you just melt your stuff under vacuum, and you evaporate a thin layer. But another way is to start from a target, to send ions on this target to make a plasma. You have and atoms get out of the target, so it means that you don't have to heat up when you do that, and then you deposit atoms. And this is the nice thing about sputtering is that you can nearly it's generally used for materials which have very high melting temperature. Here it's not the case, by the way, but also it's used for mostly for alloys. And but here the nice thing about it is that what was used is that you can really regulate temperature, and this turns out to be very important in the growth of this film. And what happens is that when you make a thin film about bismuth, you can have some condition of growth where nanowires like this, so this is called whiskers, grow like nearly grass on your substrate. And of course they are polydispersed, but they can be very long, and it's not so complicated to isolate them and to disperse them on a substrate. And here this is one of these nanowires, so you can see it can be extremely long. And then what you can do is to make contacts on this one. And what is nice is that they are really single crystal, which can be checked by this is an example of transmission electron microscopy here. And what is also important is that you can select, you can control the orientation of this, so you can choose what is the orientation of your wire before doing transport measurements. And when we did, in fact, for a long time, what we did select is really samples with 111 surface, because we, inspired by the finding of Murakami and the famous simulation I've been showing you, this is where we thought that maybe the topological character was maybe the most interesting. So this is one of these nanowires, and we make connections here with tungsten. And why? And this tungsten is deposited, in fact, with a focused ion beam under vacuum. And the reason why we use a special technique to deposit contacts is that we can etch bismuth before deposition. So we damage a little bit bismuth here, but this is important because we can remove oxide. The problem with bismuth, it is you can see it there, by the way. This is here. You know, you have always a thin layer of oxide, and of course you need to remove that, and this is done by the focused ion beam is just going to remove this with the ions. And then the nice thing is that in the same vacuum you can deposit tungsten just by cracking some gas.
Sorry, I don't know, maybe you mentioned it, but what is the substrate in this?
Yeah, this is silicon oxide.
Silicon oxide.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, this is standard substrate. So you can either have it doped or undoped. Below, this is silicon oxide. But we did not have very successful experiment with gate, so it doesn't matter. And so now, first, so when you've done this kind of thing, you can first measure your system in the normal state. But the normal state, because I mean when I speak about the normal state, that because I have these tungsten electrodes, and what I forgot maybe to mention is these are superconducting at low temperature, you know, and they have a superconducting temperature which is 5 Kelvin. And what we'll see is also interesting is that the critical field is extremely high. So the interesting physics will come at low temperature, but I have to show you what happens, in fact, when the electrodes are normal. And even if it's not very exciting, because it gives us some information on the sample. So this is just resistance of these wires as a function of length. So nothing exciting. The resistance increases linearly with length. This is Ohm's law. There is some variation from sample to sample. And from there, but the variation nearly comes from, in fact, the contact resistance here, which may depend. And from the slope, in fact, what we can deduce is the elastic mean free path. Because what we can do is, as you may know, the Ohm's law can be rewrite maybe in, even it's a very classical law for resistance, we can write it in a more fancy way here, where the resistance of the wire of length L is a contact resistance, plus, in fact, this is just Joule formula. If you may not recognize it, but it's something which, this is quantum resistance divided by the number of modes in your system that you have to estimate, which sometimes is not so easy because it means that you have to know the electron wavelengths in your system. And this is length divided by L elastic. This is just Joule, which is written this way. So from these measurements, we can deduce, in fact, knowing the number of modes, so that is we have to estimate the Fermi wavelengths, and we have to know something about our system, that is most of the transport takes place in the surfaces, and we have to know something about Fermi wavelengths. But yeah.
Are not these states, according to the theory, ballistic?
No, because we have, you know, the theory is only telling us about hinges here.
Yes.
So in this sample, we know something. We have two ballistic states, and most of the states are surface states. Of course, as I told you, these surface states do not exist in the sophisticated theory, because what they used is that idealized bismuth, where you have no bulk state and no surface states. But now we are now in the real world, and we are dealing with a real sample.
Okay, but according to the theory, the resistance is zero.
No, the resistance, according to a theory, should be just half of quantum resistance. Yeah. But you know what, here we find, no, but this is a very good question. Yeah, because it tells us how, here we measure resistance of about, you know, a few hundred ohms. So it means that we are dominated by a lot of diffusive channels, which are the surface states, and that we don't care about. But okay, that's life. Yeah. So this is what we're starting with. And now, but okay, so this is not very interesting. Okay, we have, but anyway, no, we can, for example, what could be interesting, I should not say that, because there are extremely beautiful work on the normal state of bismuth with its bulk states and surface states. So for us, it's not interesting. But some people looked at the bulk states. You can have a very beautiful physics in very high magnetic field, Shubnikov-Darras oscillations. You have plenty of stuff. I should not say that. Like this is what is doing Kamran Benia, for example. You may know. For the surface states, some people found, in fact, that you can have Aharonov-Bohm oscillations for these surface states. And okay, so I should not. But for our case, it's not interesting, but we have them. So now, what we think becomes more interesting is when we cool down the sample, so now we cool down, tungsten now becomes superconducting. And so we have, when the sample is not too long, of course, this, for example, in this guy, we have only a small drop of resistance, which corresponds to a small transition here. So, but I'm going to focus on the sample which is not too long. This is this sample here, 1.4 micron. And then what you find is indeed that you have a supercurrent in your sample. So what is plotted here, in fact, is what we call differential resistance, which means that we add a DC current to AC current, and we can measure, in fact, the dV over the I. And what we can find is that when the DC current is low, your system has a zero resistance. This is signature of proximity, superconductivity. And when you increase this DC current, here you have a big jump, followed by some little jumps here. And this is a transition to the normal state here. And what we call here is this special current here, in which you jump from superconducting state to normal state, is called the critical current of our junction. Is this okay, or are you used to this kind of things? Or okay. AC current in top of DC current with, okay, let's say this is few nanoamps, and now we change DC current. And this is a way, okay, there are other ways to measure critical current, but this is one of the simplest way to do that. Okay. What you can also do is IV characteristic directly with a DC current, but this is a DC measurement, which sometimes is a little more noisy, and this one is a very simple way to do that. So, okay, we have done what we call a SNS junction. So this is a Josephson junction where we replace the tunnel barrier with a normal wire. And this is known to work because Cooper pairs can travel in a normal system if it's not too long, if you are at low enough temperature, and if you don't have too much phase breaking events. So this is known. You can do this with gold nanowires, silver nanowires, with all kind of stuff. This is called proximity-induced superconductivity. So far, nothing special. But except you could argue that on the value of you could discuss the value of this critical current, which is maybe too small compared to what we would expect from the resistance of the wire, but this can be due to a lot of things. So now what comes more puzzling and more interesting is what happens when you apply magnetic field.
How do you predict your critical current?
There is very simple relation, which is depending on the junction. Okay, it depends. Junction is separated between what people call long and short junction for depending on the length. Well, so what we have to compare the length of the junction to the superconducting coherence length. And once this length is short enough, in fact, the physics of proximity effect is determined by the bulk. So you have this simple relation here, is that RNIC is of the order of delta. And there is a prefactor, which delta over E, I should say, because this has to be a voltage. And the prefactor may depend of if you are diffusive or ballistic. And this is short. For long junction, and I think we are most of the case in this situation, which is in fact more interesting, because here you have an larger energy scale which comes into the game, which is the so-called Thouless energy. I don't know if you're familiar with this Thouless energy here, which is a purely mesoscopic quantity. And which is in fact the inverse time it takes for a carrier, an electron, to cross the wire. So for diffusive wire, this is the value, and for ballistic wire, it is this quantity here. But what's nice, in fact, is no, because this is useful, I will have to use that. And what is nice is that this now doesn't depend anymore on the superconducting gap. And so, so now the physics of proximity-induced superconductivity is purely a mesoscopic physics. The gap is just here to produce Cooper pairs and what we call Andreev pairs in the system, and what means here is that in fact this can be written in terms of energy, that the tailless energy is in fact big in that case because length is small, and here this is tailless energy is smaller than delta. Of course, you know, this is always it's always the smallest energy scale which wins in this kind of physics. But this is, I think, for me, from my point of view, long junctions are more interesting because they do not depend on this, and we will come back to this. Okay, so this is where we stand, and but now what we yes, okay. A little, yes, we did. In fact, this is that's a good point. We have, in fact, trapping current, which is smaller than, in fact, switching current. But this is a small effect in this kind of junctions because there is a lot of. I think the reason why it is a small effect is that you can view this as having. It's very different from a tunnel junction. It's more like a shunted tunnel junction, where the normal state resistance of your wire is in parallel with Josephson junction. And so in that particular case, the hysteresis is quite small, but it is there. It is there. You could even, but I agree that this is not clear in this picture here. But for example, when you have smaller, some of them have smaller current, and then you can see it better. Okay, so now I come to, I think, the interesting stuff. Because we apply magnetic field to these junctions. And we look at the supercurrent as a function of magnetic field. And this is a kind of curve we have here. You can see, okay, well, it is, the supercurrent decreases with magnetic field. This is what we expect. But look at the scale here. This is Teslas. And so in order to kill the supercurrent, we need to apply, you know, and even at 7 Tesla. So, but you could argue, okay, but what 7 Tesla means? So now we do the same experiment. This is with the silver nanowire. And if we do it with the silver nanowire, you know, at 0.1 Tesla, it's gone, nothing else. We have lost the supercurrent. So, and why is that? Because so I don't know, at this stage, we don't know. The supercurrent is just transmission of pairs in the normal state, and these pairs make, in principle, in a homogeneous sample. Let's imagine here this is a gold sample because it is yellow. You have all interferences. And all of these interferences acquire a phase because of Aronoff-Bohm effect. And as soon as you have put one flux quantum inside all these trajectories, you expect that you've completely scrambled this interference here, and the supercurrent is dead. And this is what you find in ordinary SNS junctions. And this is, but here, this is not the case. Here, it still survives. So, and this was very puzzling for us. And we came to the explanation that in order to have this, it means that instead of having a homogeneous bismuth nanowire, because now we have put, you know, few hundred fine art in the surface of the sample, it means that the current should travel only in very narrow paths. This is the only, you know, reasonable explanation. But then we looked more carefully, because this was on this Josephson current as a function of magnetic field. And now, so here, this is zooming, in fact, the previous curve in, you know, low field here. And then, well, if you do it, you observe that we have this kind of periodic oscillations, which look like a squid. And so okay, this was surprising. And what is nice is also the period is something which makes sense. The period corresponds indeed to one flux quantum through a surface which is length multiplied surface of the wire. So this is now in perpendicular magnetic field. Okay, and now we can redo the experiment with other magnetic field orientations, and then we still see oscillations, but now they have a different period. So this is with parallel magnetic field, and the period again fits with what we think about now. But now we have this wire is anisotrope, so it's little bit flat, and indeed we can understand the period, that we can rotate magnetic field, and it makes sense. So now we can reconstruct, with this kind of experiment, we can reconstruct that indeed we have interferences between two channels along the edges of facets of this wire. And now you can ask Alexandre, and he can show you a lot of data on samples where we see this kind of oscillations. He has a book of them. Okay? And so now this gives us some argument that indeed Cooper pairs travel in these narrow channels, and that these narrow channels are likely to sit along the hinges or edges of these facets of these crystalline nanowires. But in order to go, yes? So now the field is now, if we here the field is along Z here. This was the field along Z. And now I present you data where the field is in plane. And for different orientations. For orientations, you know, there is an angle here. For example, when the field is along the axis of the wire, you don't see oscillations anymore, which makes sense. Yeah, here we have, okay, here this is rescaled with this is with the cosine theta. But here you can see the real data is like this, and depending on the field orientation, you find different periods here. I'm sorry, here we don't, our parallel field was very limited, so we could not go very far, but I think we could rescale, in fact, properly all these curves with an angle which corresponds to the orientation of the wire with respect to the field in parallel, the parallel field. Okay. But so now I would like to present you some other experiments where we measure something more. Here we were measuring the critical current. That is the maximum value of supercurrent which can go in SNS junction. So now, in order to go beyond that, since we have Josephson effect, what we would like to know is the whole Josephson relation in these junctions. And this is what I want to discuss. But before that, unless you know everything about the Andreev states, SNS junctions, and current phase relation, I can skip this part here. So it's up to, but I thought that maybe you, in spite you have maybe heard about topological superconductivity and so on, you may not have seen so much about Andreev states. So who wants to skip this part? Okay. So I don't know. Maybe they can. Okay. So maybe what they can go is they can go for the pause now, and we can join them after that. It's up to. Okay.
Maybe keep it short, and if there are a lot of questions.
Yeah. Okay. I keep it short. Okay. So.
But nonetheless, the break is a wonderful idea because it's exactly the point you have that now.
Yes. Okay. So we make the break first, and then I just make some short short thing about Andreev states. Okay? So we do that. Bon. Bon. Merci. Yeah, yeah.
Is that by what order?
It depends on the sample, but but it makes sense when we will see that it's going to make sense when we admit that the supercurrent is mainly carried by this 1D state and
Okay.
not by the diffusive
Okay,
state.
by
So the point is that normal transport is carried by any state.
Yep.
And the idea is that the picture we have, hopefully if it is correct, is that the supercurrent only travels through a small number of these 1D states. This is what maybe this is because we work with very long junction. And with short junction, situation might be different, because in short junction, we may have contribution also of the surface states.
Yep.
But for in fact, for practical reasons, we have not done so much of short junctions, because we're very concerned about, the fact that the way we deposit superconducting electrodes may create some contamination in the vicinity of the electrode. And we know that this contamination can take place about 100 nanometers. And this is why all what I'm showing you is really because I'm now we can create these electrodes using another kind of propylene beam, which is made with helium ions, and which is resolution is much better. And then we can go in the short junction.
Okay.
Regime,
So
which
what
can be
limit is your short junction you want to be?
this is about, I think that, we are in fact, and
What's
here
the
it's a
code?
bit 700 millimeters.
Okay.
And we are always, like 2 times about that.
Yep.
And
Okay, so you'll discuss the single channel.
yes, okay. Yes, I will. So I don't know. Do you think I'm too slow or not?
I don't know, this is very interesting for me, so it's
Yes, okay.
it's perfectly.
Okay.
I wanted to know about the critical temperature of tungsten.
Yeah, it's like 5 Kelvin.
Yeah, 5 Kelvin.
Yeah, this is strange.
Strange.
It's strange because pure tungsten, if you look in textbooks, this is very low.
Millikelvin.
Yeah, exactly. But this is tungsten, which is strongly doped with carbon. This is in fact tungsten carbide. Yes. This is very, very different.
Okay. And another question about band structure of bismuth. You said that there is a huge spin orbit couplet. That means that hole and electron pockets are spin polarized. Yes.
It's more tricky. No, they're not spin polarized. No, because you have inversion. Bismuth. No, because spin orbit doesn't give you exactly. So atomic spin orbit is just going to lift bands with respect to one another.
Yes.
But in order to have spin polarizations, you need also to make to break some symmetry in your system.
Yes.
For example, if you look at the surface state, the surface state they have Rashba spin orbit, and then you have polarized bands which are split.
Okay.
I didn't come to them, and you can see, but the bulk bands are not split.
Okay.
Yeah, because because you have inversion. The whole when you have invergent symmetry, in
Yes.
fact, you don't have this kind of effect.
Okay. And so in your transport current that you measure, there is the sum of currents, spin polarized currents from the surface states and the bulk.
Yes, there are
no-
few. Yeah,
Yes.
and in fact, I was wrong that saying there is nothing to see in the normal state. Now, recently, we have discovered that the normal state bears signature of spin orbit. But what you have to do is you have to measure not linear transport, but nonlinear transport.
Okay.
And then you have some diode effect. The magnetoresistance depends on the current. And here, because when you apply a huge current, then you create spin polarization.
Okay.
And then you can see, because the non-linear magnetoresistance is not symmetrical function.
Okay.
So, but okay, but this we discovered recently.
Okay.
And this is nice because you can estimate spin orbit with this.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So I will try to be very brief. Okay. But I want to anyway remind you what Andreev states are. So if you put a normal piece of material between superconducting electrodes, you know that quasi-particles of the normal metal cannot enter the superconductor because of the gap. But what they can do, in fact, is be reflected at the interface as a whole, which is schematized here. And this is called Andreev reflection. So they form this kind of strange pairs here, which are in Andreev pairs, which are constituted by one electron and its time reversed as a whole, which can live in the normal metal. And so what happens is, in spite there is a gap in the superconductor, you have in fact this kind of pairs which can form in the normal metal below. What is interesting is that they give rise to states which are below the gap and which are and which exist if there is a phase coherence here, which are called Andreev bound states. And what is interesting is that these states can make discrete levels which are determined by the finite length of the system. And these discrete levels are just determined by looking at boundary conditions here. So these boundary conditions depend on the phase difference between the superconductor here. There is some, in fact, phase shift which is involved in the Andreev reflection. I cannot explain you that, but you may have seen that, which is depends on the energy of the system. And in our case, since we're interested only in very low energies, this will be nearly, this guy R cosine is nearly a pi over 2, so this will give you a pi shift, which is important. And when the junction is very long, you have to take into account that there is some phase which enters the propagation. That is due to the fact that you have, in fact, this can be seen as a wave vector of your difference of wave vector between electron and holes in your system, and you have some delta K L which comes into the game. So this adds you some phase factor here. So in the case of short junctions, you can neglect, in fact, this extra phase here. And what you have, in fact, is formation of only when transmission is perfectly equal to 1, then it's very simple because this guy is just pi here. And so it gives you, in fact, you can at 0, and it is finite at otherwise. And so if you inverse this relation here, you can find that you have two states here, which are just cosine phi, two reverse states, which energy relation is just plus and minus cos phi over 2. And what is interesting is that because of this pi factor here, they cross here at, you have some, they nearly cross here at pi. But this crossing is very fragile because as soon as you have finite transmission of the system, you can show easily that you lose this crossing here, and that your relation becomes more like cosine phi now. And so now if you have a small junction with disorder, you can in fact have all kind of Andreev states which correspond to the different transmission coefficients of your junction. And in fact, you may know that if you have a diffusive system here, you can even make the connection between the position of these Andreev states and the distribution of transmission coefficients in your system. So this is a typical Andreev spectrum here for disordered short SNS junction. And now what comes maybe different and probably more interesting to my point of view is when you have a long junction here. Because then you can neglect this guy here because this is only pi, but now you have to take into account of this propagating term here, which gives you some linear dispersion relation of this approximatively linear dispersion relation of these Andreev states. So the Andreev states at first approximation looks like this, and again you find they have some degeneracy here at zero energy. Here this picture is a little bit misleading because these were constructed from the normal state, and phi naught here is phi naught for normal electrons. So this is why it may be a little bit puzzling to look at this picture here, because this was. But now, if you so now if you add disorder in this kind of relation, it looks like this. So you have a lot of Andreev states and formation of a small gap here, but which is very small compared to the superconducting gap. This is called a mini gap here. And what is nice is that the order of magnitude of this gap is what I discussed just before. This is a tau-less energy here. And so the more disorder you put, the smaller this gap into the game. So now this is why I told you that all the physics of this long SNS junction is now determined by a mesoscopic energy scale of your system, and has nothing to do with the gap of the contacts, which is a large energy scale here. But in order, what is interesting to remember here is that the disorder has really smooth, in fact, this, and this is what we're going to exploit here, smooth this Andreev states. And now, I want to make the connection because I'm not going to present you some direct measurements of the Andreev spectrum, even if now it becomes possible in certain cases to make this spectroscopy of the Andreev states, at least at small energy scales. But in our case, I will present you what the consequence of this Andreev spectrum, which is in fact the current phase relation here, that is the Josephson relation, which is just in fact using this relation that the Josephson current is just obtained by summing up the derivative of these Andreev levels as a function of phase multiplied by the population of these Andreev levels. So at very low temperature, it means that you're going to, this is Fermi energy here, which is taken at 0 here. So you're going to sum up all the derivative of these states. And of course, the states which are, this is superconducting gap. So here you have no contributions here above, but then you can see that this is a spectrum calculated for a long SNS junction, and you have to sum up the contribution of all these states which are occupied at 0 temperature. And here you can see, in fact, that your, and when there is no disorder, you are sensitive to the Andreev levels crossing, which happens at pi here. And this is why you find a current phase relation which has this funny shape here, which has a big jump at pi. So it is a sawtooth current phase relation, instead of the sinus you may be more accustomed to. But as soon as you have disorder, so the critical current is reduced. This is because of, in fact, this comes from the tau-less energy here, by a factor L elastic over L squared here, and for the long junction. And then it becomes sinus-like here. So this is why it's interesting to measure, in fact, the current phase relation in a Josephson junction. This is a nice way to, in fact, have an idea of the quality of this Andreev states here. But now I've been only speaking about ordinary Josephson junction, and maybe I would like to say you a few words what happens now if you replace your normal state by a topological insulator. And an example here, which is a numerical example here, this is just graphene without, so this is real graphene without spin-orbit interaction with disorder. It gives you, standard Andreev spectrum for a diffusive system. But what is interesting is that you may have heard that if you introduce on-site spin-orbit coupling in graphene, which is a little bit artificial because this is not so easy, the real spin orbit of carbon is very small, but some people, for example, have done recently hexagonal lattice of bismuth, which is very difficult to stabilize, but where you can find, instead of, then you can expect that the Andreev spectrum, it will be very different and will consist of only, you know, a small number of Andreev states. Here you are at the limit, in fact, between short and long junctions. This is why you have basically only 2 states here. And in fact, you would ask there are 4 because you have 2 edges here, but you can see that there are nearly straight lines here, and you could ask that there might be a very small gap here, but this is just interaction between the edges. But you can see that this is the same disorder in the 2 cases, and in fact, this guy, the spectrum here looks more like the spectrum, Andreev spectrum of a ballistic system. And in terms of, now if you translate this in terms of current phase relation, you can find indeed, okay, you can discuss about the remaining crossing here, but this is not the issue here. You have basically a sawtooth current phase relation, and which is very robust, because here you can add disorder, you can add bad transmission in the interface. You still have this sawtooth, which is very robust. If you do the same kind of calculation, the current phase relation, in the case where so this is again graphene, but which is not topological, then it behaves like any, you know, the current phase relation is very sensitive to the bad transmission at the interface. Okay? So this is why we think that measuring this current phase relation is very interesting and important to probe topology in Andreev states. Okay, this is so to motivate what I'm going to show you. So how do we measure now this current phase relation? The good way to say it in principle would be to in fact measure the magnetization of an NS loop. These experiments are very difficult to do, and as far as I know, they have been done only once or 2 times in the literature. But there is a trick which is very efficient and which was in fact initialized by the Quantronics group here, that if you want to determine the current phase relation of a small Josephson junction, you make a squid and put it in parallel with the reference big junctions here. And so you create what we call the asymmetric squid. And now and then you can see that in the limit where the critical current of this junction is very big compared to the small junction, it's very easy to show that the oscillations you will have in your squid will be only determined by the small junction. Okay, you can do complicated calculation to see that, but I think the most simple way to see it is just to use this very simple formula you can find in any textbooks for squids, you know, and develop it in the limit where, in fact, the I1 is very small, the current of the small junction is very small compared to the current in the big junction. And then if you do it, you can see that what you have is that the critical current is just, and this is, you know, you can see here, you start from squid-like oscillations, which are standard squid-like oscillation, and then to very tiny oscillations here, which correspond to the, which are in fact determined by the small junction here. Here this was done in fact for a very simple case where both junctions have sinusoidal current phase relation, but you could do that in any other junctions. And what is nice is that now it doesn't depend at all on the current phase relation of the big junction, because the phase, what you can show is that the phase across the big junction is fixed. It's nearly pi over 2, and so you're not sensitive to the detail of the current phase relation of this junction, which can be ugly, complicated, you don't care, and you only measure, in fact, the current phase relation of the small one. And I'm sorry. Yes.
So what's the advantage of having a massive junction instead of
Because, but yeah, of course, you can replace, but then you, okay, but then what you're going to say is that you're going to, because if you want to measure a squid, you know, if you make a superconducting wire with no junction at all, it will be a short circuit, unless you reach the critical current of this wire, which is very which is not, so which will become normal, but you don't know where it will going to become normal. It's a very ill-defined setup. Here we know that where the transition is going to take place by making a reference junction. So here, this is the setup we have done. I agree with you. You could make also AC squid. This is another story. But then you have to drive it with a material inductance. I will show you this also. But I think if in this kind of DC measurements, you really need to put a junction in your system. Otherwise, you know, this will, you will have no transition at all, unless all your normal wire becomes, all your superconducting wire becomes normal, but then it's a very ill-defined transition. Okay, so now I'm coming back to the bismuth nanowire we were looking at. So here it is. And now what we add here is an extra superconducting wire in parallel, but in which we create, in fact, a weak link here. So this will be our big junction, and this is our small junction. So this is what I'm going to show you just now. And this is where the results are. So you can see, the critical current of this squid is like this. So you can see that most of the current goes through the big junction. This is what we expect. And you have small modulation on the top. And these are, and you can see that indeed these small modulations are not sinus. They are really sawtooth-like. And you can see, but when you go to low temperature, here you can even see that there is some phase modulation in this sawtooth. And here it is. At low temperature, you can see, in fact, that this sawtooth is, in fact, the sum of two sawtooths of different periods. There is some beating, in fact, between these two sawtooths. And one of them has a larger current than the other one. So this corresponds, so what we believe, that this corresponds to one edge of the nanowire. Let's say, in fact, the red one, and the other edge, which is, in fact, the yellow one. And we can decompose, in fact, this current phase relation into two sawtooth current phase relation, but which have different periodicities here, because they correspond to then close different fluxes. So in
So the two edge states are localized. One is very close on the substrate, and one is more.
Exactly. Yeah, that. And we can even understand one. You know, for example, the top one has been more damaged than the bottom one because of this etching here. So this makes sense. In this particular sample, we have it makes sense. We have, unfortunately, I must say that sometimes it looks that we have more. We have now that in that case, this was a nice case where we could identify properly the two edge states. It turns out that sometimes we have much more edge states than we think, and we'll come back to this, and this may be due to steps in bismuth, and each step producing a different edge. Yes?
So what's the effect of a temperature wire?
Yeah, because this one is this one corresponds to a lower transmission, and this one is much more fragile with temperature. So in fact, you lose this one. This one is more robust in temperature than this one. If you prefer, this one would correspond to a larger effective tau-less energy than this one. But this can be understood, by if you make numerical simulations on these edge states and putting some, finite transmission. What you show, in fact, this is what I've been showing just briefly before, that you keep the sawtooth, but the amplitude is reduced, and if the amplitude is reduced, it is also more fragile with temperature. There is, in fact, important energy scale in Josephson junction, which is related to the Josephson energy, and which depends on the Josephson current. So we know that small critical current are more fragile than high critical currents, and this is just what we see. Okay? So now you can also make the Fourier transform, and you can see indeed that this is like you expect for a sawtooth. You have many harmonics. And in principle, from the you can try from the way these harmonics decrease, you can try to estimate the transmission of these modes, but this turned out to be very large. And you know what is interesting is to compare the transmission of these modes of what you would expect, assuming that you're sensitive to the mean free path. Because we know what the mean free path is. We have determined it at, on the normal state. And we see that the effective mean free path, to have such high mean free path here, to have such high transmission should be extremely large. So this tells us indeed that these 1D states are really robust against disorder. But now you could ask, so why don't we have, we know, because I've been telling you that in the normal state, I have also many diffusive states which come from the surface. You know, because we had Ohm's law in the normal state, remember that. So where are they? Cannot they, why don't they bear also, why don't they carry also a critical current? Okay, the explanation we can give at this stage is that when you have a ballistic channel, the critical current is about EVF over L. We are in the long junction limit, remember. When now you have a diffusive channel, this number is reduced by the diffusion by L elastic over L at the power 2, which is in our case a factor more than 100. And so the contribution, even if we have much more of these diffusive states, their contribution can be estimated to be very small. And more than that, what we have also is that if you look at the nature of the Andreev reflection here, which is creating a time reverse particle. You send a hole and you have a time reversed hole. In principle, it's very robust against the standard reflection here, where in fact you should have to, when you have a helical state, because of the spin momentum locking, when you reflect your momentum, you should also flip the spin. And if you don't have magnetic impurities, this standard reflection is very much suppressed compared to the Andreev reflection. So this is another argument to believe that most of the supercurrent is indeed carried by these ballistic states in our system. So now okay, how much do I have? Ah, yes, that's fine. Okay. So I can, no, because 15 minutes. Oh, yes, so I have to go fast. But I would like to, because I was surprised. So 15 minutes. So I can show briefly some recent experiments which were done by Alexandre. And now this is another squid. But this one is a very special one because it's whole bismuth squid. So by chance, what happened is that when you deposit these bismuth nanowires, in that case, the deposition was done with a laser, and we had this kind of object here, which is a ring. But what is nice is that this is a highly strained crystal, so this ring is still a single crystal. You can even follow the orientation. It is just bent because of you introduce strain in the system. And so you start with a bismuth ring like this, and you can make two superconducting contacts. So now you still have a squid, but in the two branches of the squid, you have bismuth. And what you find, and if you're interested, but now I have only a quarter of an hour, so yeah. Yeah, this is just a thermal effect. It looks like this is a thermal effect. In principle, these bismuth alloys are straight. But now they were deposited by heating them with, we had problems of deposition, and Ali Kazumov found a trick to do this with a laser beam. And so they were heated. And so they were distorted by heating, but still keeping a single crystalline. This is because this is so the system. But you can take a single crystal and bend it, and depending on the Young modulus, it will come back or stay like this. And it means that there might be dislocations and defects. Yeah, but this is a real sample which is like this, and which is full bismuth. And so you could put two superconducting electrodes, and you measure again. So you have done a squid, and you can measure field oscillations of this squid. You still find the sawtooth. But then if you look in the detail, you can find some field asymmetry in this sawtooth. So, for example, this is red, and this is a red curve. Is function. You have reverse magnetic field, and this is green curve. This is with. You can see that you have not the B minus B relation is not obeyed. But now, if you take data with opposite current, that is, you in fact inject opposite current in your system, you can recover, in fact, the blue and green curve which match each other, which means that you have this relation in the switching current that if you reverse both current and magnetic field, you recover the symmetry in your system. In some sense, what it tells you is that when you make these switching measurements, you introduce a current through your system, and you break time reversal symmetry. But because you know that your system is overall time reversal symmetric, when you reverse magnetic field, you should have this relation, and it works. And what is nice is that in principle, this can help you to determine a spin-orbit field in your system. So it means that now you have a effective magnetic field which acts on your carriers, which contains some component which is proportional to the current. And this is a way to estimate, in fact, spin-orbit interaction. Okay, so this is kind of thing we're trying to understand. Something interesting also that you could find in this squid, which was not in the previous squid, is that the sawtooth here are reversed for positive magnetic field and negative magnetic field. It seems difficult to understand, but it means that the reverse of the sawtooth tells you that for positive magnetic field, the current prefers to travel preferentially in the up branch, and otherwise it prefers to travel in the lower branch. And the way to understand that is maybe related to the helicity of the undressed state. So this is kind of thing we understand. And what also has done Alexandre, which is nice, is that he had measured this current phase relation, but with, you know how you measure switching current? You just, in fact, ramp current in your system and you record voltage. And as soon as you have voltage across your junction, you say, okay, here it's there, this is a critical current. And you can do this at different speeds. And when you and here each time you have a lot of, and you can do that many times. So this is all the traces you can find here. And in general, what I was presenting you is the average of all these traces. But if you do not average them, you can see that indeed this is a weird sawtooth. That is, you have, in fact, that you have a big jump at pi, but you can also see that there is some parasitic sawtooth which appears, and this parasitic sawtooth becomes more and more important when you increase the velocity. And so we, in fact, understood this very recently due to the fact that you may have, when you ramp your current sufficiently fast, you may are in the situation where the system, instead of jumping in the fundamental state, prefers to follow a branch of supercurrent which is out of equilibrium. And this is why we think that, so when we measure the current phase relation slowly, we measure the equilibrium current phase relation with the sawtooth at pi as expected. But then when you go fast, you may measure another current phase relation, which is in fact the purple one here, which could be understood as the average of the, because we cannot select, in fact, any parity in that case, because we may have the two parities are equally present in our system, but we can measure, in fact, another current phase relation, which is out of equilibrium one, which is a parity average one, and which is shifted. And the fact that we measure this is really due to the fact that we have a long junction. Because if you do that in short junctions, which you may be most more familiar with that, the two parities give you opposite currents. So this average parity current phase relation should be just 0. But here it's not the case. Okay, so this is the kind of games we can play. And I think now I have still 5 minutes. How much? 10 minutes? 10 minutes, okay. So I would like to show you another way to probe, in fact, this topological inch states in bismuth, which really trying to probe the dynamics of this, now probing the dynamics of this junction as a vicinity of pi here. Because you know that this crossing here is a very special one. It's not the same kind of crossing that it should be protected, and we should have some signature of that. And what was in fact, what was predicted by Fu and Kane some time ago, you know, concerning this topological Josephson junction. So this is maybe a little bit similar of what we have. In fact, what is addressed here is a 2D system with a quantum speedhole edge. They have in mind now AC squid setup, where you have here, in fact, only one helical edge in your system. And what they find is that indeed, if you measure the current noise here, you should have, due to this, so this is both for short and long junction here, you should have strong low frequency and low temperature current noise because of this crossing of inch states. So now are we sensitive to this? This is a question we're going to address. And you know, this in fact, there was already prediction of such a strong current noise, but for ballistic short junction here, where you have in fact this very simple spectrum here we discussed. And this is just due to the fact that when you have a ballistic junction like this, you expect that the current is going to be like a two-state. It will behave as a two-state telegraphic noise system, where you can randomly jump from a plus E to minus E, close to pi. You're going to jump, and with a characteristic time. And so you expect to have some noise here whose correlation function is proportional to exponential with this characteristic time here. You have here Fermi functions here, and if you make a Fourier transform, you expect indeed to have some very peaked noise at omega equals 0, and some kind of Lorentzian noise here which diverge at low temperature, and which is in fact peaked at pi here. So it means that, of course, this is very strongly phase dependent, and at pi it should diverge. And how can we, and then it was shown that indeed if now you add some anti-crossing, then of course the noise becomes phase dependent with a very characteristic shape. And this is nice because we can, doing this kind of experiments, in our case, we could really probe this Andreev levels crossing. And this is what we try to do. Unfortunately, we were not smart enough to be able to directly measure the noise, but what we did instead is measure linear response. Because we know that, you should know that, of course, applying fluctuation dissipation theorem, that noise should be related to some dissipative response in your system. So the idea now is to, in fact, probe your NS ring with some AC field. So applying not only a DC flux, but a small AC flux, and measure out-of-phase response, that is dissipation. And this is what we did with this bismuth ring. Okay, let me skip it now. And now, so this is the same guy that you may recognize here, but now it is connected to a superconducting resonator, which is a multimode, in fact, superconducting resonator. And the nice thing is that we can monitor now all the resonances of this resonator and measure both resonance frequency and quality factor for all these resonances as a function of DC flux. And you can see, in fact, this is an example for, this is one of the lowest frequency mode of the resonator. You can see that we have sharp periodic peaks in the quality factor. So this gives you some dissipation. This is a signature of dissipation occurring at each multiple values of odd multiplus values of pi, which is in fact translating in terms of flux at odd multiple values of phi over 2. And when you analyze these peaks here, you can really see that this is compatible with real Andreev crossing. And this is here just to show you, if you do the same experiment now on a standard Josephson junction, because of the anti-crossing here, which you expect due to disorder, in fact, instead of having a peak at pi, you have, in fact, a dip, and very characteristic dip here. And this is why which comes, in fact, from the anti-crossing here, because you can show that dissipation is directly proportional to the square of the current here. And so it goes to 0 at pi, because as soon as you have anti-crossing, and so it gives this strange shape here. And also at low temperature, this feature is completely suppressed. Instead, when you have a real crossing as here, you should expect a huge peak of dissipation, which is really this due to this large noise predicted by Fu and Kane, and that this peak should go up at low temperature. And this is indeed what we measure here at, for several frequencies. So this is why I was telling you that indeed we have some direct signature by this AC experiment on the topological nature of the crossing of Andreev states. Okay, now I think I could show you more data on that, but I have to conclude. And I hope I have to convince you that indeed there is maybe something interesting in this bismuth nanowires as possible topological Josephson junction. That I've been trying to show you that the Josephson current is carried by a small number of disordered protected edge states in the system, which are revealed by squid interferometry and by this sawtooth current phase relation. I've been trying to show you that high frequency measurement, even if this is very fast, can reveal you this topological crossing, the nature of topological crossing. I've been also flashing some data on switching statistics, which also gives you interesting information on these inch states also. And we're trying to, in fact, investigate directly the supercurrent noise. Yes, this is not a very easy experiment. We have some data also on the tunnel spectroscopy of these states, very preliminary data, which are used by putting a tunnel junction of these wires that we want to, that we would like to exploit. And also we're trying to investigate, I've been showing you only data on nanowires, but there could be a lot of interesting stuff working on 2D structures. They are not so easy to stabilize, but we're trying to do that. And eventually 3D structures, small, now we're producing small crystals of bismuth of funny shapes, which could be interesting. And also what we would like to do is to be able to also do experiments in the normal state, because we have exploited the fact that supercurrent is very sensitive to these inch states. But in the normal state, we can see that indeed there should be, if you can look at these edge states here, should carry eventually orbital currents in magnetic field or speed currents also, and which could be very nice to reveal directly. Okay, so I'm sorry I had to rush at the very end.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Yes, please. Maybe you said it to zero. Why bilayer bismuth is topologically interesting?
That's a good point. Do I know it? That's a good question. If I, it's not that easy when I give you a piece of material to know whether it's a topological insulator. Now, what people do, they compute the band structure, and they compute topological invariance. They find that they look, in fact, the more rigorous way to do it is look to eigenvalues of inversion operator at the different spatial points of the Brillouin zone. And if you do that, indeed, with bismuth bilayer, you find that it has a good criteria for being a 2D topological insulator. Like, this is, and you have indeed band inversion and all what you need for that. But I think this is it's not as far, I don't know what you think, Sébastien, but if I give you a piece of material.
I was laughing because 20 years ago, if you ask experimentalists, how do you know if this material has these properties? You would say, I do an experiment. Now you say, you do a computation.
No, but no.
Manifestation and experiment.
Yeah. In fact, there is, but it's not that easy because you have also. No, but this is not that easy to. There are no really experiment on this bilayer except on this bilayer on the bulk. And so what people have done is this tunneling experiment, which is nice, which tells you that you have extra density of states, but it doesn't tell you anything about the dispersion. You don't know anything about if there is something like a Fermi velocity. And this is why we think it's important to do transport, because in transport, you know that indeed you have no one, on the bilayers, there is only indirect measurement, like RPS, like this is spectroscopy, what exists for the moment. And indeed there are, these numerical simulations.
What's that?
I think there is someone, yeah?
On the other slide, you show these sawtooth signal, but which in fact contain two different sawtooth signals, right? And it said that one of them was weaker.
Yes.
Could you explain this again?
Yeah, because it is just, you expect, in fact, to have two sawtooths because you have two edges. And they have, when you insert them in a squid, you understood that they have slightly different periodicities, because one in the inner and one in the outer side of the wire. But why do they have different amplitude? I think this is just because the transmission is not, you can see it here when we have to etch the wire, so the transmission is not perfect. And I've told you, okay, they are robust, that the sawtooth is robust against bulk transmission. This is, in fact, true, but you can anyway have you still keep the sawtooth, but the amplitude is reduced. Yeah, because just that, and this, in fact, and in that case, it is even stronger because one was close to the short junction limit, one was more like in the long junction case, but this is something we can find numerically indeed, that when we increase, when we decrease the transmission, one is depending, you still have a sawtooth, but it is reduced. Amplitude is reduced. Okay, at least this is the way we understand it in our case. You could also have other reasons, because what we also have to investigate, in fact, is that what is probable is that in terms of, we have also steps. In fact, STM people see many steps in this, along edges of bismuth. And maybe our description of taking only one state per edge is wrong. It should be renormalized by the number of steps. And in certain samples, you may have, in fact, we can only understand the supercon by taking much more hinges than one we could think of. So it means that we have also, and you can see when you do good pictures of these samples, that in cases you can see that in fact you have steps and terraces, and maybe each of them give you a hinge state. So I've been showing you maybe a simple case, but in the reality is more complicated. And this is something we have to understand. What needs to be understood also in the system is the role of strain, because the band structure of bismuth has been shown to be dependent on of strain you apply to bismuth. You can even invert. There is in certain zone of the Brillouin zone, the gap is very small and can be inverted with strain. So all kind of things can happen. Some people have seen this inversion close to a screw dislocation. Some STM people have seen that. So, okay, the problem is that samples are maybe more complicated than the ideal view I was giving you. So this is about few hundred ohms, which means that you have many channels. But most of them, we believe, are diffusive channels due to surface states. Yes. They are not perfectly clean, as you can see, because we have to remove the layer of oxide. And so there is some, I would say that you can see here on this picture, if you look, I don't know, you were a little far away, but if you come, you will see that indeed bismuth is a little bit damaged. And when you look at the resistance as a function of length, you can see indeed that the contact resistance is significant. So you have the transmission is not perfect, certainly not. Yeah, what I've been trying to show you, but maybe we can, I don't know, some people are maybe tired, so we can discuss this in private, but this, what I've been trying to show you, that we are doing this high frequency experiment, we can show that we are indeed very, very sensitive to the presence of crossing and anti-crossing. This was the idea of the high frequency experiment. And here, this is in fact some calculation, in fact here, where what you would expect if there is a full anti-crossing in the system. And you can see that what we measure is the red points here. And we have small anti-crossing, we should accept the formation of a dip inside this peak. And we have seen this dip. Okay, you could argue, how do you know? Have you measured this dip in other systems? The answer is yes. We know that when you have anti-crossing, you have this dip. And here, we never saw such a dip. And instead, we see this peak, in fact, is going up at low temperature, which is indeed the signature that with our experimental resolution, which of course is not perfect, there is no anti-crossing. And here we can even say that this is our resolution is about 30 millikelvin energy scale. Okay, this is what we can say. No anti-crossing with this energy scale. Okay.